It started life as a 1951 Studebaker, but then came the Buick grill, the Cadillac bumpers, the Chrysler headlights, and the Toyota chassis. Is this brilliant or bizarre? Meet the Studebaker, the Toydalac Acre, Caddy Toy Acre, the Studa Toy Alac, Studa. All right, let's just meet the Frankentruck. I'm not sure exactly what to call this thing, but it definitely grabs your attention. Hi there, Rick DeBrule with another chapter in the automotive evolution. And as always, I'm here at the Martin Auto Museum in Phoenix. And I often point out this place is a wonderful collection, more than 180 cars. Each one has, well, its own story. But to be honest, I'm not exactly sure where to begin or end with the story on this wild custom. You know, it started life as a 1951 Studebaker Model R6, a half-ton pickup truck. Somewhere along the line, most of that was discarded. Now it sits, believe it or not, on a mid-1970s Toyota chassis with a variety of body parts donated by Cadillac, Buick, Chrysler, Oldsmobile, who knows what else. Slap on a wild custom color-shifting paint job in green, no less, and you end up with something that here at the museum we affectionately call Mel's Pickle, named in honor of our museum founder, Mel Martin. And when Hoovie from Hoovie's Garage was here just the other day, it definitely grabbed his attention. People ask me, what's the theme of this museum? And I say, Mel Martin, the founder, the theme is, what did he think was cool that day?
What is that?
It's about as custom as they get.
This is crazy.
But before we dive in all the way, make sure you like and subscribe. And in the comments down below, let me know what I got right. Let me know what I got wrong, if it's possible to get something right or wrong with this. And most importantly, tell me what you think about this. Is this a beauty or a beast? All right, back to our, well, Frankentruck. But before we give you all the gory details, let's talk about where it started. Studebaker entered the post-war pickup market in 1949 with its all-new 2R Series trucks that replaced the company's pre-war designs with a more modern and streamlined look. With its rounded cab, integrated fenders, and car-like styling, the Studebaker pickup stood apart from the more traditional designs that were offered by Ford, Chevrolet, and Dodge. It was aimed at farmers, businesses, and drivers who wanted a practical truck with a little more comfort and, shall we say, personality. The 1951 Studebaker R6 half-ton pickup was part of the second year of the 2R Series lineup. It was powered by Studebaker's 170 cubic inch Champion inline-six engine, producing about 85 horsepower and used a 3-speed manual transmission. With its 112-inch wheelbase and light-duty capability, the R6 was designed for everyday work, but its distinctive styling made it, well, a little more memorable. That rounded body lines, the unique grille, gave it an identity that really still attracts attention today. Studebaker trucks continued into the 1960s, but the company's financial struggles made it difficult to compete with the larger manufacturers. Production ended in the United States in 1963. Well, that was then. Now, this Studebaker truck, well, it's taken on a whole new look. It's been chopped, it's been channeled, it's got a crazy concoction of parts from a variety of different cars, mostly from the 1950s. But just to be different, underneath this wild body is a Toyota pickup truck from the mid-1970s. You remember those trucks. They were a very important milestone for Toyota as they were growing here in the United States, answering the American buyer's desire for a smaller truck that was more dependable and, very importantly back then, got great gas mileage. All right, so that is the foundation. Beyond that, well, I'm not sure what exactly the creator's vision was, but in many ways, this Studebaker represents the true spirit of the classic custom and hot rod era. Back in the early days of hot rodding and customizing, builders weren't ordering complete packages from catalogs. They weren't following internet build threads or searching for the perfect matching components. They built cars with pretty much what they could find. Often because, well, they really had no choice. Some of it was driven by a lack of money, but part of it was the fact that there really wasn't a big aftermarket for custom bits and pieces like we have today. A hot rodder might find a better engine from one car, a grill from another, seats from something else, and suspension pieces, well, from whatever was available. Sometimes the goal was to go fast, Sometimes, well, it was simply to look outrageous. The Hirohata Merc is a classic example. Based on a 1951 Mercury, 3 Ford grills were combined. Chevy grill teeth were used as accents, and Cadillac hubcaps covered the wheels. George Barris's a la carte has parts from Model T, a 57 Chrysler, and a 56 DeSoto, among others. Gene Winfield built his Jade Idol by starting with a 1956 Mercury two-door hardtop. He then added Chrysler New Yorker fender panels, Lucas headlights, and like the pickle, he painted it various shades of green. And how many times have you seen the taillights from a 1959 Cadillac used on just about every kind of car? You know, their willingness to borrow, adapt, and reinvent established one of the most defining principles of the classic custom era, a philosophy that lives on today in unique creations like the Studebaker pickle. Let's walk around and take a closer look at our custom 1951 Studebaker pickup truck. And I want to start by talking about why this was a great base to use in terms of styling. When you look at the hood of the 1951 Studebaker, notice how it comes down and smoothly blends into the fenders right here. For 1951, that was pretty bold styling. And in fact, we can look at a 1951 Ford pickup truck that's right beside it. See how the hood comes down kind of like a clamshell, stops right here, and the fenders are a completely different element. Very sharp delineation, almost a 90-degree angle. Once again, going back over to the Studebaker, well, it just flows and blends very, very nicely. Of course, that's about the end of all I can talk about from a stock perspective because everything else on this is wildly custom. They've gotten rid of the hood ornament, which is too bad because I love the beautiful hood ornament from this truck back in those days. And of course, they put in all these louvers. I think there's a total of 144 of them on the hood, which is kind of a classic styling touch for a lot of customizers and hot rods. Up front, well, that is a Buick grill, big teeth, as you can see right there. And down here, well, we've got the bumper ends from a Cadillac. They refer to these as Dagmars. If you don't know about Dagmar, look her up. She was an actress in the 1950s, and you'll understand how they came up with the term Dagmar to refer to those bullets that come out the top. Right here, we've got headlights that in my eye look like they came from a 61 or 62 Chrysler. But as I mentioned, this on the outside started life as a Studebaker, but underneath, well, they use a Toyota chassis. But they've done so much work to every aspect of this. For example, the roof has been chopped 3 inches. And when I say chopped, they've actually lowered it 3 inches. They've also done something called channeling, where they've taken the body and they've dropped it about 10 inches over that Toyota chassis. They've also got rear air ride shocks, so it rides on Toyota suspension. So they've done a massive amount of work. It does have air ride, as I mentioned, so you could pick it up and make it so you can actually drive it and not hit things as you go. At the back end, believe it or not, this bed cover, which really there is no bed, right here, is supposedly the hood from a 1970 Olds Toronado. This is our fuel filler right there. I'm not sure that these fins came from anything other than the inspiration from the 1950s. The taillights, well, those are from a 1955 Olds 98, and the Buick rear bumper, I think, was from 1957. But of course, we have to talk about this paint. It's metallic green PPG paint, and it's color changing. You see as I walk by, instead of using standard absorbing dyes, the paint relies on microscopic, multi-layered flakes that blend, they refract, they reflect specific wavelengths of light based on your viewing angle. To be honest with you, I barely understand any of that, but it goes back to the classic candy color paint jobs that had those metal flakes in them and just gave a different look. So as you walk around and you look at this, you see so many different things from so many different angles, whether it's up front and all those classic 1950s parts, the wheels, the hubcaps. Now they've also shaved the door handles, so you have to open it either with electronically or from the inside. They've kept the basic roof line intact, which once again I think is a great thing to do. And we've got our sign that talks about the fact that it's Mel's Pickle. But in many ways, I go back to, this is a classic hot rod, a classic custom from the 1950s, the way it would have been done in the 50s or the 60s, grabbing a little bit of this and a little bit of that to come up with something that is truly wild. And wild is probably the best word you can use to describe this 1951 Studebaker custom. Well, the first thing you're going to notice when you get into this pickle, custom 1951 Studebaker, is that it's a little different than the way you'd get into most trucks. And that's because when they channeled this, remember they dropped the body down onto the frame, the result was it's much lower, and we end up with this lip right here. You could call it a step, and I imagine if the air ride suspension was in a full rise situation, it might be a step. But right now, it's just something you step over. I think the easiest way to get in is to simply slide in, close the door, and once you're inside, to be honest with you, it's not the most comfortable driving position. And that's because, as I mentioned, the body's been channeled, dropped onto the frame. The result is the seat is kind of high in relation to the steering wheel and the pedals, and so it's a little bit awkward. Does it drive? Yeah, it's fine. You can get around wherever you need to go. Would I want to go a long distance in this situation? No, but let's face it, that's not exactly what this truck was built for. Inside, obviously, a lot of custom touches. And of course, we have to start with the steering wheel, which is really cool. This half steering wheel was probably cut down from a different steering wheel. To be honest with you, I don't recognize what steering wheel this is off the top of my head. It's not a Studebaker 1951 because that would have only had 2 spokes that came off to the side. This has 4 spokes. And of course, they've cut it down, cut off the top, cut off the bottom. And don't you love these cool dice that they've put on there? Half steering wheels were pretty popular back in the 50s and 60s for several reasons. Obviously, to start with the half steering wheel, you got a great view of your speedometer, your gauges. That was nice. When you're getting in or out, you've got extra room down below. Your knees aren't hitting the steering wheel. But I think, to be honest with you, it was all about the look. And the reason being is, back in the 1950s and the 60s, it was all about aviation, jet-inspired design. And doesn't this look like a controller for an airplane? This one, by the way, has got some extra added things, a little more modern. It's got a tilt mechanism to it, a slide so you can bring it in or out. But it's just cool looking, and I think that's what it was all about. The dash is another classic example of a little bit of this and a little bit of that. This dash is from a 1949 Mercury. To be honest with you, it's actually pretty stock. The layout of the gauges is pretty normal. Yeah, they've added some bezels here, like aluminum bezels you see there, but these are normal. A few extra toggles that have been added. Clock's in the right place. Of course, they've added the wild metal flake paint job, the same thing that they have on the outside, that color shifting, a little more modern radio. But basically, it's a stock 1949 Mercury dashboard. I love this great big massive 8-ball shifter right here. That's just kind of fun looking. They built their own leather center console. Nice big bench seat. And to be honest with you, it's relatively comfortable. I've ridden in some hot rods that are just definitely not comfortable. This isn't bad. It's a good compromise. Once again, not something you want to take on a long trip, but that's not what this was designed for after all. This was designed for short trips, having some fun. And this shifter, by the way, is connected to a 5-speed Toyota transmission. And I'll explain why in just a moment, because up front, well, we're not talking a big hot rod engine. But it's a great combination, nicely finished, and it's just a perfect example, once again, of using a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of whimsy, and creating a nice custom interior that, quite frankly, is probably a little bit tamer than what you see on the outside. Well, if we lift up the hood on our pickle here at the museum, you're not going to find exactly what you'd expect. Instead of a massive V8 all dressed up, we have a Toyota 4-cylinder engine. And remember, this was built on a Toyota pickup chassis. So whoever built it just decided it was easier to keep the existing running gear. And while this engine may not have a lot of wow factor, this is one of Toyota's most dependable engines. It's called the 20R, a 2.2 liter, that's about 134 cubic inches. It's a 4-cylinder with a single overhead cam. And if you owned a Toyota back in the late 1970s, this was very likely the engine that was up front. In many ways, this was the engine that actually helped to establish Toyota as a dependable and inexpensive brand here in the United States market. Now, obviously, it didn't have a lot of grunt. I mean, you got about 96 horsepower. But it would practically run forever. People regularly got more than 200,000 miles on these things. Now, the engine that followed this one was the 22R. That one had more performance, and it stayed in production until 1997. So, yes, it's an odd choice in many ways. But it meant that whoever built this thing was more focused on the outside, the looks, and just wanted something dependable up front to guarantee that it could make it to the next car show where the hood would be down and people would be oohing and awing over the outside, not worried about what was underneath. By the way, I walked around this truck with a gentle magnet and checked out just about every panel, and guess what? It is all steel, including these fins back here. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's a lot of filler that's been added, but everything, the top of the bed, the fenders, the sides, just about everything from front to back, top to bottom, it's an all steel build, and that is impressive. So there you have it, a great example of how classic customizers work. You know, they took a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and they made it into something that would grab everybody's attention. And this Studebaker really takes everything to the next level, using all those parts from the 50s into the 60s, mounting them on a Toyota chassis with modern color shifting paint. It's old, it's new, it's American, it's foreign, it's a Franken truck.